We're back into the swing of things across all the competitive regions, save for North America, but that means we get to go right back into power rankings week by week, starting with obviously the regions that are actually going on in Europe and the LCK. Welcome to League Unlock. Eric and Mark with you guys, and everyone loves power rankings. I know Mark loves power rankings.
Power rankings are great because it allows us to rank these teams, set out who is doing well, who is doing poorly to start out the year, and it gives everybody at home a nice opportunity to compare with our list and then also flame us if it's different. It's always great.
I love flame. You know, you got to stay warm, especially in the heat of winter when it's minus 30 out half the time.
Got to get toasty with those flaming comments.
Got to get toasty. And for the LCK, which is where we're starting, it's pretty easily divided. You've got 5 2-0 teams and 5 0-2 teams, which actually makes power rankings a little bit difficult to differentiate when there's only 2 records in the entire league. But there's no way you can go against putting Griffin in at number 1. They didn't have the hardest schedule by any means in week 1, but man, they looked way more dominant than any other team.
What else is there to say other than just this little fact here that Chovy and Tarzan didn't die? They did
4 games.
They just did not die this entire week. That is incredible stuff right there from them. Griffin absolutely came out of the gates roaring, showing everybody the form that they had to end the summer split last year, and then during the Kespa Cup, and then here again, it is full pedal to the metal for Griffin.
So Griffin coming in at number 1 is no big surprise. I think most people would have expected that. The arrow numbers and how they've changed is based on our preseason rankings. So Griffin, we had them at number 1. They're at number 1 after week 1. I just said 1 3 times, Mark. I hope you enjoyed it. But number 2 is a little bit more surprising. Damwon. I know there's been a lot of hype around this squad. We had them fighting for one of those final playoff spots, but man, they showed up big time in week 1. Another 2-0 for them, 4-0, and they arguably maybe had a harder schedule. At least, I mean, KT, you were expecting big things out of them before Naguri absolutely popped off on the Vladimir, and all of a sudden, he looks like one of the best top laners in the league.
He was certainly one of the guys that you knew you had to keep an eye on heading into this split in the LCK. You had heard so much about him leading up during Worlds when players were scrimming against Damwon Gaming, things like that. This was the guy that you had always heard about, and now seeing it here on the LCK stage, this is some serious style from Damwon Gaming and Naguri specifically, and that's where I think you have them at number 2 ahead of SK Telecom. I think that Damwon Gaming had a bit of a tougher schedule this early week, not by many large margins here, but definitely a little bit tougher, and I think that they showed a little bit more style, a little bit more flair in their victories this week.
Yeah, a win against KT, whereas, SKT matched up against Jin Air, which anytime you're playing against Jin Air, still expect them to be a main bottom feeder for the majority of the spring split. So yeah, Damwon tougher schedule. And SKT did have, I don't want to say faltering, but not the cleanest games. Damwon, I mean, they had some close ones up until about the 20 or 30 minute mark. But once they got a lead and started snowballing, the game was done within a matter of minutes.
Right, and you mentioned that with SKT, who is at number 3 in the power rankings. And when you're talking about what they did this week, there were a lot of positives, a lot of excitement for the fans of this super squad roster that's been assembled here. But you are right. There were times where you were like, okay, they do need a little bit more time to work together, figure out some communication things, set on their priorities on the map, those type of things. You still think that SK Telecom needs a bit more time together to work on, but I definitely want to single out here their vision control on the map this week is right on par, perfection from SKT on lighting up the map with the vision that they need to see around.
You're definitely happy with week 1 if you're an SKT fan. Handwell Life and Sandbox Gaming were the other 2-0 squads. Again, some surprises you probably didn't expect to perform that well. Hanwha didn't have the magic 4-0. They did drop a game to KT, but in their 2 wins against them, they looked super solid. They haven't even needed Mujin. They've been starting Bono in all these games, and he's looked pretty decent in some of them. Sandbox, no way people were expecting them to go 2-0. I didn't think they'd be fighting for playoffs, and of course they still might not be. It's only week 1, but great debut for them.
Fantastic debut from Sandbox Gaming. We were not expecting them to be towards the same level that Griffin and Damwon Gaming have shown us of these new challenger level teams stepping right into the LCK and not missing a beat with their success. When you look here at Sandbox Gaming, yeah, you see a lot of the same successes that we have with Griffin and Damwon Gaming, these rookies, the fun, exciting play that they bring to the map, the different compositions and whatnot. But I think when you are looking at Sandbox Gaming, and the one thing that does make me still be a little bit cautious with them is you still see some of those nerves or jitters around stuff like making the calls for going for Baron, things like that, or maybe not as organized as a roster like an SKT or something like that. And I think that's where they can make some improvements moving forward.
Yeah, they'll still have plenty of room to grow, but a 2-0 week in your LCK debut is pretty darn good. And now we go to the bottom 5. All the 0-2 squads, which, by the way, feature all 3 Worlds participants from last year. Pretty difficult to rank when none of them have wins. But KT, they didn't play Smeb in their series against Damwon, and it sounds like maybe he was dealing with some sickness issues. You still feel like KT should be the best out of this bunch.
Bro, someone get Smeb some emergency chicken and ginger soup or something. Get him nice and healthy again, and let's get back on the Rift. I think KT Roaster has obviously here this 0-2 start, not what you want to start out this 2019 spring split. But when you looked at their games and what they brought there still is a lot of potential for this roster. There's still a lot of talent here, again, especially towards that top side, but things are going to have to be more stable in the bottom side, or else they're going to be giving up far too many advantages to other teams here.
Yeah, I'm not sure they even know who they want to start in that AD carry spot going forward. Afrika, Genji, and Kingzone next on the list. I think Jin Air is the clear bottom team out of all those, and I mean, the other 3, you could probably argue any position for that 7, 8, 9. None of them look particularly good. Peanut, in particular, is a guy who I think was incredibly underwhelming in week 1.
Yeah, and that for me is a real sad thing. Peanut, one of my favorite players, of course, in the League of Legends scene, and I had a lot of expectations for him heading to Gen G. He was going to be this guy that was going to be relied upon to create a lot of the positive momentum for this roster, to find these advantages and help snowball them. And the big problem here is, well, Peanut was the problem this week for Gen G. They had other problems, of course, but Peanut was a very large problem in why they were getting behind in these games and not finding ways back into them.
Yeah, well, hopefully he can bounce back. They do. Maybe some subs come in for them, but right now Peanut's the guy for Gen G, and they need him to get back on track.